Welcome to Dad's Free Time Game Reviews, where I review the games that I play when no one needs me. Today's game is Prince of Persia for the Xbox 360. From what I can remember, this was the first game out on the Xbox 360. I had played the Prince of Persia trilogy on Xbox and PlayStation 2, and I remember wanting to get my hands on this game, but I had neither an Xbox 360 nor the money to buy a Prince of Persia game anyway. So I made a bookmark in my head to get the game whenever I got an Xbox 360. I mean, the scores were all pretty high. What they were advertising with this game is beautiful landscapes and an open world to do your parkour in. And of course there's a beautiful woman, because the Prince of Persia is nobody without doing stupid stuff for a beautiful woman. Am I right? Anyway, this is my review for Prince of Persia. So this no-name prince, and I use that very loosely, has lost his donkey carrying all his money in a sandstorm. Pretty soon he gets lost himself. That is, until a beautiful woman falls into his lap. Oh yeah, and she is being chased by guards, and her father the king, of an unspecified population-less area. No population. Thinking of only his little buddy, he forgets his donkey and money quickly and follows the princess and protects her from her father. Still being chased, they run into Ahriman's temple. No-name prince has to have a scuffle with the princess's father, and in the skirmish, the father, the king, cut down the tree of light, turning everything dark. Now that can't be good at all. When they get away from the king, no-name prince, and I still use that term loosely, finds out that the god Ahriman and his 4 generals, a concubine, an alchemist, a warrior, and a hunter have been freed when the tree was cut down. Elika, the princess, is actually the vessel of Orzmod, the high god, and it is her job to stop the bad generals and put them and Ahriman back in their prison. This game, interestingly enough, is based on a religion called Zoroastrianism. A lot of people believe that Christianity was based off of this religion. Now, I don't know exactly why they didn't tell you that in this game, probably because Christians would be pretty upset. I mean, you know, all they had to do was have a narrator explain how long ago the religion dates back. It would have made this story a little bit more interesting to know that right off the bat, as opposed to accidentally finding this out myself because I looked up something else about the game. You know, I have a big problem with the story in general, mostly because there isn't much of it, and there are holes in it like Swiss cheese. First of all, this game is called The Prince of Persia. What kind of prince do you know travels with a donkey containing all of his money? Second of all, have you seen this place? Even though it's in ruins, I find it very hard to believe that this used to be a normal city. It would be more believable if actual people still inhabited it. Seriously, there's a king and a princess. Where the hell are all the subjects? Third of all, this story is told by some weird flashback. Not a bunch of flashbacks, one flashback that's really vague and becomes more clear as the game goes on. I mean, they laffy-taffy the shit out of this story. The bad guys were really forgettable. It was probably due to them all being covered in the symbiote from Spider-Man, or the fact that they barely had any backstories. In order to get the backstories, you would have to really press Elika to explain to you what the people were doing before they got turned by Ahriman.
It was beautiful. I used to play here as a child. Sometimes I'd spend the night at the top.
Were you as serious then as you are now?
Dreams were all I had time for. The fertile ground is at the top. We can use that.
I would have appreciated a few cutscenes, but that would have been impossible because then they would have had to make actual character models of real people, and then they would have had to put those real people into the city once Elika freed it from slime. I mean, it would have made the game's story more competent, but who needs to flesh out a real story with people and a civilization based on a real religion that people still follow today? To make up for the lack of backstory, or for any of the characters really, they play up the romance between Elika and the prince thief. Let's face it, he's a thief. But it's like watching a 90s romance movie from high school. Like, the Prince of Persia is basically Charlie Sheen before he had AIDS, and Elika is any girl that was good enough to date Charlie Sheen in the movies. After a while, it became really ridiculous. Because you can't have romance that lasts as long as this game without the mention of sex. So in order to not do that, they kept it real awkward. Like, they kept talking about weird stuff like,
No way you're gonna look so good if you end up covered in corruption and spouting stuff about
he's an idiot.
I look good, huh?
Oh, don't tell me you don't know. I've never met a beautiful woman who didn't know she was beautiful.
And I've never met a man who used flattery unless he wanted something.
You have such a suspicious mind.
No, I'm just nowhere near as naive as you think I am.
Or,
Alright, I'll go first. But hey, you're staring at my ass. I felt you looking.
I thought you'd lost your ass.
Donkey. I can feel you looking.
Just climb the tower.
just weird. It didn't help that both of them had the whitest voices imaginable. I mean, Nolan North? The guy who voices Nathan Drake from Uncharted? I personally would have been super excited to hear a British or Middle Eastern type of accent. Nothing against Nolan North, he's great, but romance is always better in an accent. If Jake Gyllenhaal can do it, why can't these guys? One final thing, the story doesn't actually end. The ending is tied up in DLC. All these years, I thought it was a cliffhanger for another game, you know, a sequel. It wasn't. There was an extra stage I needed to buy. Bullshit. Prince of Persia consists of the same parkour platforming it's famous for, with traps, fighting, bosses, and puzzles mixed in. It's an open world game that spreads itself out by using light seeds. Light seeds are pieces of energy held within the tree that the king destroyed in the beginning of the story. Elika has the power of Orsmod to begin with, but the light seeds will allow her, and the no-name prince thief, the ability to use colored glyphs to reach spots they couldn't previously. You can't collect light seeds in an area of darkness, so you have to free up areas by having Elika infuse the power station with her light powers. Once that is done, it reveals all the light seeds, and the no-name prince thief and Elika are free to roam the area and collect as many light seeds as possible. Once they collect a certain amount, that's when they can get a new glyph. All the glyphs are pretty cool, but the third glyph, the one where you're flying on Elika's back, gave me motion sickness. You have to pay a lot of attention to how she flies because you have to dodge stone structures. She does a lot of loop-de-loops and barrel rolls just to get to a spot that wasn't that far away in the first place. With all that was going on in the screen, once my eyes and brain oriented themselves, she would flip again, and that kind of made me sick, I'm not gonna lie. The fighting sections are a little lame. The no-name prince thief and Elika will randomly run into bad guys in dark areas to fight, but unlike previous Prince of Persia games, this prince is not an acrobatic fighter. Rather, Elika is very acrobatic, and this prince moves like a rock with its shoelaces tied together. Everything up until he actually fights the people would suggest that he is very fleet of foot. But once he pulls out his sword, he loses all his grace and acrobatic skill. Also, the fighting is all arena type fighting, So you kind of want to push the bad guys to the edge and then kick them off. End of fight. A lot of times you get there fast enough and you can destroy them before the goo manifests itself. Elika fights with you, which is really cool, and it gives you the opportunity to chain combos together. However, you have all the combos at the beginning of the game, so just figure out what the longest combo is and reuse it constantly. The puzzles are just a bunch of puzzles where you twist and turn levers in different sequences to have something show the way you want it to be so you can move on. There's nothing really special or imaginative about these things. One thing to note is that Elika will always save you. You seriously will never die. Even during boss fights, the most that can happen is that the boss gets all their energy back. I don't really know how to feel about this. On one hand, it's very convenient, especially when you're doing parkour. I mean, imagine all those parkour videos you watched on YouTube where the guy doing the trick didn't quite make it and then a beautiful magic woman falls from the sky, grabs him, and pulls him back to safety. That's pretty cool. But never having to lose a fight is a little weird. Bittersweet, I guess. One thing that I actually loved about this game were the way the parkour elements and glyphs were chained together at the end. You would have to do this for the final boss stages. Just one long chain of glyphs and continuous running. And if you fell, Elika would save you, but you were back at the beginning. It actually added a nice challenge and urgency as the chain parkour was used to escape breaking structures. I'm sad that it wasn't in the game a lot more.
The music is not very memorable at all. I mean, you can tell that they hired a symphony to do a bunch of really stereotypical tracks. Or they bought already made tracks from people who just cranked them out. I don't know, but obviously it's cut and paste. The bosses are just like normal bad guys. I mean, it's just the 4 bad guys from the story over and over again. Every glyph that you open up, you have to fight them again so that you can get to the power station that they are guarding. They each have about 4 of them in their territories. The bosses actually have a few techniques that make them more special than the normal bad guys. They have the ability to protect themselves against 2 out of 3 of your techniques. So, in one phase, you have to use a throw to open your attack. In another phase, you have to attack first with Elika. And then in the third phase, you have to attack using the no-name Prince Thief's sword. They all have a small gimmick that isn't very impressive, especially when you can't die. The warrior has the most impressive gimmick because you can't scare him off. You have to trap him or push him off the cliff. Given the whole way the game is gone, I'd say that the bosses were okay, but having to fight them so many times was not okay.
So there you have it, guys. My review of Prince of Persia for the Xbox 360. For all the high marks that it received, I feel that it didn't age well. It seemed like they spent all their time developing the world, but not any of the time whatsoever making the game complete. Which is understandable, but why did it get such high marks? Surely when the Xbox 360 just came out, people weren't so smitten by how great the graphics were that they didn't recognize that the story was really bare. I honestly felt robbed by the ending. Everything else I had a problem with wasn't really that bad, but in light of no story, it was insulting. Anyway, if you like my artwork for this walkthrough and the game review, the artwork is on craftyacuity.org. Go ahead and check out the other artwork pieces that I put up there too. If you want to commission me to do some artwork for you, or you want to purchase a print of the artwork on craftyacuity.org, send me an email. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm more of a responder than a poster. Okay. Have a day nice. Have a day nice. Have a nice day, everybody.